Awesome, awesome. Welcome back. Thank you again for learning with me a charter. This one happens to be the city of Compton, California. All right. And Article 15 is where I'm picking up today after yesterday's Article 14. With that in mind, hopefully you are learning just as much as I am and learning about the vocabulary, vol- vernacular of a charter. I was looking to see if I could just speed through that a little bit more, but I wanted to start with the title, of course. So, of this video, at any rate, here we are, Article 15, Public Utilities, Franchises. All right, Section 1500, City owned public utility. No public utility owned by the city shall be sold, leased, or otherwise transferred unless authorized by the affirmative votes of 2/3 of the electors voting on such proposition at a general or special election at which such proposition is submitted. Section 1501, Granting of franchises. Any person, firm, or corporation furnishing the city or its inhabitants with transportation, communication, terminal facilities, water, light, heat, power, refrigeration, storage, or any other public utility or service, or using the public streets, ways, alleys, or places for the operation of plants, works, or equipment for the furnishing thereof, or traversing any portion of the city for the transmitting or conveying of any such service elsewhere, may be required by ordinance to have a valid and existing franchise. The City Council is empowered to grant such franchise to any such person, firm, or corporation, whether operating under an existing franchise or not. The City Council is empowered to grant such franchise to any such person, firm, or corporation, whether operating under an existing franchise or not. The City Council may prescribe the terms and conditions of any such grant. It may also provide by procedural ordinance the method of procedure and additional terms and conditions for making such grants subject to the provisions of this charter. Section 1502, Resolution of Intention, Notice and Public Hearing. Before granting any franchise, the City Council shall pass a resolution declaring its intention to grant the same, stating the name of the proposed grantee, the character of the franchise, and the terms and conditions upon which it is proposed to be granted. Such resolution shall fix and set forth the day, hour, and place, when and where any persons having any interest therein or any objection to the granting thereof may appear before the city council and be heard thereon. It shall direct the city clerk to publish said resolution at least once within 15 days of the passage thereof in the official newspaper. Said notice shall be published at least 10 days prior to the date of hearing. At the time set for the hearing, the city council shall proceed to hear and pass upon all protests, and its decision thereon shall be final and conclusive. Thereafter, it may grant or deny the franchise subject to the right of referendum of the people. Section 1503, Term of Franchise. Every franchise shall state the term for which it is granted, which, unless it be indeterminate, as provided for herein, shall not exceed 25 years. A franchise grant may be indeterminate, that is to say, it may provide that it shall endure in full force and effect until the same, with the consent of the Public Utilities Commission of the State of California, shall be voluntarily surrendered or abandoned by its possessor, or until the State of California or some municipal or public corporation thereunto duly authorized by law shall purchase by voluntary agreement or shall condemn and take under the power of eminent domain all property actually used and useful in the exercise of such franchise and situate within the territorial limits of the state, municipal, or public corporation purchasing or condemning such property, or until the franchise shall be forfeited for noncompliance with its terms by the possessor thereof. Section 1504, grant to be in lieu of all other franchises. Any franchise granted by the city with respect to any given utility service shall be in lieu of all other franchises, rights, or privileges owned by the grantee or by any successor of the grantee to any right under such franchise for the rendering of such utility service within the limits of the city as they now or may hereafter exist, except any franchise derived under Section 19 of Article 16, of Article 11 of the Constitution. I'm just ready to get to Article 16. Okay, so rereading here, it says, and we want to get this together. Section 1504, grant to be in lieu of all other franchises. Any franchise granted by the city with respect to any given utility service shall be in lieu of all other franchises, rights, or privileges owned by the grantee or by any successor of the grantee to any right under such franchise for the rendering of such utility service within the limits of the city as they now or may hereafter exist, except any franchise derived under Section 19 of Article 11 of the Constitution of California, as said section exited prior to the amendment thereof, adopted October 10, 1911. The acceptance of any franchise hereunder shall operate as an abandonment of all such franchises, rights, and privileges within the limits of the city, as such limits shall at any time exist in lieu of which such franchise shall be granted. Any franchise granted hereunder shall not become effective until written acceptance thereof shall have been filed by the grantee thereof with the city clerk. Such acceptance shall be filed within 10 days after the adoption of the ordinance granting the franchise or any extension thereof granted by the city council, and when so filed, such acceptance shall constitute a continuing agreement of such grantee that if any, when the city shall thereafter annex or consolidate with additional territory, any and all franchises, rights, and privileges owned by the grantee therein, except the franchise derived under said constitutional provision, shall likewise be deemed to be abandoned within the limits of such territory. Section 1505, eminent domain. No franchise grant shall in any way or to any extent impair or affect the right of the city to acquire the property of the grantee thereof, either by purchase or through the exercise of the right of eminent domain. And nothing herein contained shall be construed to contract away or to modify or to abridge either for a term or in perpetuity the city's right of eminent domain with respect to any public utility. Okay. So if I'm thinking I need to reread that portion, then somebody else has got to be thinking it because they say it's nothing new under the sun. Section 1505, eminent domain. No franchise grant shall in any way or to any extent impair or affect the right of the city to acquire the property of the grantee thereof, either by purchase or through the exercise of the right of eminent domain. And nothing herein contained shall be construed to contract away or to modify or to abridge either for a term or in perpetuity of the city's right of eminent domain with respect to any public utility. Okay. Every franchise grant shall reserve to the city the right to purchase the property of such utility either at an agreed price or a price to be determined in a manner to be prescribed in the grant or in the procedural ordinance here and above mentioned. In fixing the price to be paid by the city for any utility, no allowance shall be made for franchise value other than the actual amount paid to the city at the time of the franchise acquisition. Goodwill, going concern, earning power, going concern. That's a new one for me. Going concern. Earning power, increased cost of reproduction, severance damage, or increased value of right of way. Going concern. Goodwill, going concern. Okay. Section 1506. Duties of grantees. By its acceptance of any franchise hereunder, the grantee shall covenant and agree to perform and be bound by each and all of the terms and conditions imposed in the grant, or by procedural ordinance, and shall further agree to A, comply with all lawful ordinances, rules, and regulations theretofore or thereafter adopted by the City Council in the exercise of its police power governing the construction, maintenance, and operation of its plants, works, or equipment. B, paid to the city on demand the cost of all repairs to public property made necessary by any of the operations of the grantee under such franchise. C, indemnify and hold harmless the city and its officers from any and all liability for damages proximately resulting from any operations under such franchise. D, remove and relocate without expense to the city any facilities installed, used, and maintained under the franchise if and when made necessary by any lawful change of grade, alignment, or width of any public street, way, alley, or place, including the construction of any subway or viaduct. And E, pay to the city during the life of the franchise a percentage to be specified in the grant of the gross annual receipts of the grantee within the limits of the city or such other compensation as the city council may prescribe in the grant. Okay. And duties of the grantees. Section 1507. Exercising rights without franchise. The exercise by any person, firm, or corporation of any privilege for which a franchise is required without possessing a valid and existing franchise, therefore, shall be a misdemeanor and shall be punished in the same manner as violations of this charter are punishable, and each day that such condition continues to exist shall constitute a separate violation. Learning about a charter of a city. Now, this is Article 16, Employees Retirement System. Section 1600, Employees Retirement System. The California Public Employees Retirement Act, as now existing and as hereafter amended, having previously been adopted by vote of the city electorate as the retirement program for the employees of the city, shall remain the retirement system for the city's employees. Plenary authority and power is hereby vested in the city, its city council, and its several officers, agents, and employees to do and perform every act and exercise every power granted, permitted, or required in accordance with the provisions of the California Public Employees Retirement Act to continue the participation by the city as a contract member of the California Public Employees Retirement System. Okay. Section 1601, Retirement Contract. The contract previously entered into with the Board of Administration of the Public Employees Retirement System may be terminated by the city only under authority granted by ordinance adopted by a majority vote of the electors of the city. Article 17. I think we can read and we see here. Information right there. Let's go back here. And wow, this is so interesting. Okay, let me go back. Article 17. Miscellaneous. Section 1700. Definitions. Unless the provision or the context otherwise requires, as used in this charter, a shall is mandatory and may is permissive. He means both masculine and feminine gender. Section 1701, state of extreme emergency. During the existence of any national or local emergency created by military attack or sabotage, or in the providing or adequate national or local defense, or upon the occasion of a great public calamity, such as an extraordinary fire, flood, storm, epidemic, earthquake, or other disaster, the city manager is hereby authorized to take such action as is deemed by him necessary to safeguard life, health, or property, notwithstanding any other provision of this charter. During the existence of any such emergency, the responsible city officer may comply with any lawful federal or state law, order, or regulation and the provisions of this charter in safeguarding life, health, or property in the city. At the first meeting of the city council following the commencement of any such emergency or the taking of any action under this section, the city council shall review the situation and its findings as to the existence of such emergency or the need for any further action of an emergency nature, and contrary to any provision of this charter, shall be final and conclusive. Section 1702. Violations. The violation of any provision of this charter shall be deemed a misdemeanor and be punishable upon conviction by fine or term of imprisonment or both, authorized by state law for the punishment of misdemeanor crimes. Section 1703. Validity. If any provision of this charter or the application thereof to any person or circumstance is held invalid, the remainder of the charter and the application of such provision to other persons or circumstances shall not be affected thereby. All right. In the index, absence, Board of Education member, the city councilman, leave of candidate for office. And then from learning thus far, so if it's section 505, that's in Article 5. All right. And then Article 11 is where 1109 will be found. Learning something even as simple as that, but accounting. Every day is a new day for learning. Just reviewing. Accountant, city controller, independent audit, actions against city on claims prior to charter, reviews by personnel board, the administration have the city manager, powers and duties, department heads, interference in advertising. Real show. I've been reading, working, talking all day, and it's 10:43. I need not to lose my voice at this time. All right, let's see. Advertising, competitive bidding, contracts on public works, franchises, funds for official newspaper, ordinances, publishing of legal notices, tax levy for, then we have affidavits, that's the city clerk, amendments of ordinances, annual Annual bids for publishing notices, budget estimates for budget, financial report, independent audit, tax levy, annual reports, see reports. Appeal claims when rejected, from suspensions, discharge, etc., to personnel board, appointments, boards and commissions, officers, by city council, by city manager, general provisions relating to appropriations, see budget, attorney city, excuse me, city attorney, election of the city attorney, eligibility of the city attorney, claims, powers and duties, prosecutor. All right, audit, annual independent audit, city attorney to advise collections to be deposited, departmental trust fund of demands by controller, bids, centralized purchasing system, public works, publishing legal notices. We have boards and commissions, appropriations for compensation, vacancies, education board of existing boards, meetings, parks and recreation, commission, personnel board, planning commission, provisions relating to, and we had a bond indebtedness limit upon, and we had bonds. We read about all of these. These city attorney to approve of officers, boundary of city, boundary of districts, budget, adoption of annual appropriations, copies of estimates for boards and commissions, hearings, responsibility to administer, building official, appointment of building official, powers and duties, building official, candidates, activity with respect to Board of Education, City Council, election laws, leaves of absence to become charter, the city charter's actions and rights prior to. We had approval by legislature, effective data, read about enforcement of ordinances prior to, validity, violation of provisions, citizenship required for employment. Under cities, we have boundaries, districts, name of, powers of, succession, and then under civil service, we learned about appeal from suspension, etc. Appointment under, candidate for office, charges, statement of charges, citizenship required, classified service, contracts with personnel agency, the demotion, dismissal, department heads, powers, eligible list, examinations, fraud, layoffs, seniority, political activity, probationary employees, promotions, residential requirements, rules and regulations, suspensions, temporary appointments, veterans credit, violations, claims. Oh man, we learned about a lot of different things. Look at that. Actions on, audit of, city attorney for damages, presentation. We learned about a great deal. City clerk administers the oaths, compensation, election of, eligibility, all these different subsections, powers and duties, records of City of Compton, and CO, custodian, continue, the city clerk, vacancy, if we need to know commission, see the board section, compensation of boards and commission members of city councilmen, study by personnel board, complaints, says see civil service employees, hearing on street conditions, contempt, city council, power to punish, contracts, city attorney to approve, continuation of existing emergencies. Reread that again. Contract, city attorney to approve, continuation of existing emergencies, to learn about illegal interests of officers, public works, bidding, publishing of legal notices, purchasing procedure to continue in effect. We learned about the city controller, appeal from, appointment of, demands to examine, powers and duties, the city council, appointments by city council, compensation of the city council, contracts, illegal interest in an election, and they could put ellipses there for the 1,202 right there. An election, we learned about eligibility for enforced charter, interference in administrative matters, meetings, number comprising, powers, presiding officer, mayor, ordinances, and then quorum. Oh, we have more. This continues. Subpoena members, term of members, vacancies. We learned about the tax system, the county, under crime, charter violation, civil service violation involving moral turpitude, ordinance violation, damages. It says to see the franchises claims for. Under debt, we learned about bonded debt limit, the cash basis fund, tax limits, demands, audit of, if funds are insufficient, no suit previous to the presentation, rejection of or appeal to be registered, warrants. And under departments, we learned about budget estimates, continuation of the existing, creation of, disciplinary powers, funds of, heads of, trust fund, deposits to say C funds, and deputies, appointment of, discrimination in employment, forbidden districts, establishing of, voting in, education. We read about the Board of Education, compensation of, eligibility for, election of, members, number and term, vacancies. Under elections, we learned about Board of Education for special levies, general municipal elections, initiative, referendum, and recall, primary elections, procedure for holding, special municipal elections. Under emergency, learned about contracts, ordinances, the adoption of ordinances, powers, employee city. It says the city civil service and city officers and employees section. And then the city engineer, we learned about the appointment, powers and duties, expenditures. It says to see the budget, demands of the presentation, purchasing, warrants. And then for finance, it says see the budget. The fiscal year, we read about that, learned about that. Special funds, tax levies, tax system, fines, charter violations for civil service violations, ordinance violations, the fire chief, appointment of the fire chief, powers and duty of the fire chief. It says fiscal C report section. We read about the year. Franchises, duties of grantee, eminent domain, failure to acquire, granting of, notice and hearing, resolution of intention, term of, under funds. We read about and learned about capital outlays, cash basis fund, departmental trust, depositing of, petty cash, public service departments, special levies, initiative reserved to the people. Legislative powers, it says to see the council. A library, the levy for. Litigation, city attorney's duties controlled by city council. So we talked about loans, the cash basis fund, and we have the city manager appointment of, budget duties, emergency powers, powers and duties of the city manager, the election of the mayor, eligibility, powers and duties. Under meetings, it says see Board of Education, boards of and commissions, city council, and under misdemeanor, it says see crime. Next to misdemeanor says see crime. Nominations says see elections. Oaths, administering by clerk, administering of officers here. Officers and employees, it says to see the civil service section. Additional duties appointed by city council, appointed by city manager, appointed by department heads, appointed officers generally, and then bonds of, and that's continued officers, employees, department heads, interests and contracts, provisions relating to, And then have a section about the official newspaper designated by city council. We have ordinances, adoption of, amendment of, codification of, continuation and effect of effective when. And it's also continue learned about emergency, the publication, referendum, violation of, and then under revenues, it says to see budget or see funds, and city treasurer to receive estimates. It says see budget, surplus funds, tax limits. There's schools next to schools. It says see education, seniority. It says see civil service. Streets. It says to see the superintendent of streets, and it's in capital letters. Contracts for improvement, repairs, and maintenance. Subpoenas, boards and commissions, city council may issue. Succession, charter effect upon contracts, ordinances, etc. Superintendent of streets, appointment of superintendent of streets, powers and duties of superintendent of streets. Supply, centralized purchasing, inventories, rules and regulations. Taxes, budget, capital outlays fund, cash basis fund, county system of collection, fiscal year, limits on levies, special levies. Treasurer, compensation, election of, eligibility, powers and duties, vacancy, warrants on treasury, utilities, public, see franchises, contracts, depreciation, depreciation. It's a sound. Revenue, production funds of, again, I haven't said that word often. I don't have computer share the word enunciation, or probably should have said enunciation, but at any rate, it should pronounce it.
Depreciation. Depreciation.
And it was a short sound. Okay. And now I'm going to vacancy depreciation. What revenue production funds of vacancy. See Board of Education. See boards and commissions. See city council. See civil service. Veterans preference given. Violations of charter, of civil service provisions, of ordinances. Warrants. See demands. Water. See franchises. Witnesses. Power to subpoena. Zoning. Planning commission. And that is the letter Z, and there are nothing, any other pieces of information or exhibits or any, or shall we say, resources or links to any charts or the like, which would be, in my opinion, like I was saying, helpful. But that was nice. It did have an index. That's what I want to go back and share. How neat. So we have learned together about the charter of a city. And in particular, this is the city of Compton. Looking for that other side of this document. Absolutely. So thank you once again for learning with me about a charter of a city, and in this case, the city of Compton, California. And thank you so very much. And until the next time, let's continue to support one another, learn together, and